Great. There's Maggie. Well, welcome everyone to the April Conservation Commission meeting. This Earth Day week. It's been a big week so far. Sorry, what? And we have a lot on the agenda to cover today, so an exciting meeting, a good week for Scarborough, and lots to talk about in terms of protecting land and conserving our natural resources, which is why we're here. But first, I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware that this land is unceded, and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Owasquawag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Jamie, would you please take roll?
Sure. I will start in person. Jess.
Here.
Randy.
Here.
Bennett.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Pete.
Here.
And online Kathleen.
Here.
Marla.
Here.
Maggie. You're muted.
Verbal,
We can see that you're here, but for the record.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Right, and welcome staff and guests. Let's start with a vote or a motion to approve minutes from our February meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
I sure do. Jess.
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Pete.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Marla.
Yes.
Maggie.
Yes.
Thank you.
And on our agenda tonight, it's
Oh, wait, you're not an alternate.
Oh, yes.
Abel, yes. Okay.
Excellent.
Solid
Thank you.
yes.
Sorry about that. Can't keep it straight.
well, every month we get new confirmed commissioners. It's good, very active commission. So on the agenda tonight, our goals are land conservation, building resiliency, and engaging our residents in environmental stewardship. So we've got a couple of big pieces to cover under old business, an update on process with our open space planning process, where we are with the environmental standards ordinance that we have put forward, and a review of some submittals from the planning board, and another discussion about conservation principles as they relate to development in town. And then we'll also look at in new business on the topic of resiliency, the FEMA floodplain maps, which town council has asked for us to contribute to their thinking on. And we'll have some updates, which will include citizen stewardship, our education committee, and an update from Parks and Conservation Land Board, which we hope to hear about the exciting work to get us ready for the potential of the land conservation bond measure to support conserving natural resources and open space in Scarborough. Anything else that folks want to address tonight, or we're good to talk about this? Great. Okay, thanks. Let's open it for public comment.
Sure.
Everyone try to stand through if you want.
I just wanted to tell everyone that Scarborough Land Trust will be having our Pine Sale and Spring Festival on June 1st out at Broadturn Farm. This is a great way to help build habitat in your own backyards. and help kind of connect habitat together by planting native plants. We'll be going, hopefully pre-sales will be up, later next week. So you can go to our website and order plants ahead of time, or you can come to it first.
Well, I would also invite you to talk about Earth Day, the big celebration. We've got some celebrities here in the room that celebrated with us, you and Pete, Jamie.
I'm happy to defer to Jamie or Pete if they want to say something. It was all over the news.
Well, tell us about it for the record. So let's celebrate it.
There were officials from the White House, the director of the Office of Science Technology was there, and some NOAA folks were there to announce the bipartisan infrastructure law awards, of which Scarborough was the recipient. Andrew with the Land Trust is the lead on that. Well, the Land Trust is the lead on that project, in conjunction with a bunch of different state agencies and also other organizations, looking at the Scarborough Marsh itself. Probably going to be doing some modeling and looking at how the marsh might move, and then how you can use that information for land use planning decisions like conservation of land, restoration, et cetera, But NOAA also announced $123 million of BIO awards at that event. And then after the event, there was a field walk to look at the marsh, talk about the marsh. And then there was a roundtable discussion back here at Town Hall about pressing issues that communities are facing in Maine. So it was a fun day. And it was really, really cool to have folks at that level looking at the marsh and get Scarborough on the map for some of the work that we're going to be doing. So exciting day.
Right, exciting that they chose to have this announcement in Scarborough, at the marsh's edge, and
Yeah, with
And then-
Wexner Trail.
that that a number of people were present there, and particularly on this commission. Well, not as representatives of the commission, because they're different jobs that our folks have, but Pete and Jamie had speaking parts on the tour for officials. And then the roundtable included conversation from different towns, because there's 3 coastal towns that are receiving awards from this in Maine that are receiving awards from this. And there was a lot of discussion around coastal resiliency, coastal land management, and the concerns that we all face that were just really raised to a new level. And to hear it here at Town Hall, the importance of open space planning, the importance of protecting our land and doing what we can to prevent further degradation of our natural resources. So it's a great day, and congratulations, Scarborough Land Trust, and to Town of Scarborough.
To all the partners.
Yeah. So let's go into the conservation open space plan and hear an update on the process.
Yeah, so the ad hoc open space committee will have their first meeting on May 7th. And so our consultant is working on identifying baseline conditions for Scarborough. So that includes looking at conserved lands, and kind of doing a tally of that, and then looking at other priority, based on like beginning with habitat and other data sources, looking at priority areas and things like that. And one of the very first topics of discussion at the ad hoc committee meeting will be defining open space. And so the open space ad hoc committee has a lot of representation from various groups and committees in town. And so each kind of representative was asked to bring the question, what is open space, to their respective committees for discussion. And so Maggie asked that this be added to the agenda for tonight's meeting because she, as the representative of the Conservation Commission, needs to be able to kind of convey this group's thoughts as part of that process.
Anything you want to add, Maggie?
She muted again.
No. We can't hear you, Maggie. I don't think you're muted. Oh, she needs to connect to audio.
Oh, now you're muted.
There you go.
There you go.
Let's see. I'm both online and on my phone to try to get the audio right, but, so I'm in Florida on vacation, but I really wanted to hear this discussion, and hear what people have to say before the May, meeting. So I'm gonna ask Jamie to facilitate the discussion, if that's okay, but I really wanted to hear, and I don't know if you can bring up this list, Jamie?
Yeah, I
For
was
people?
working on that when I was trying to figure out why we couldn't hear you, so give me a second. Yep, I just
Okay.
need to share it.
So
Let me
there's a
just share it.
laundry list or a list here of potential items that could be included in an open space discussion. So I really just want to hear what you all have to think about this, or if there are other things that you think should be included. So, and as soon as this discussion's over, I'm going to leave the meeting, so.
And enjoy your vacation.
Yeah, thank you.
And continue my vacation, exactly.
Yes.
But I did want to hear what folks had to say.
Great, thank you.
So it's really a straightforward question, and Autumn and I kind of came up with this laundry list of potential land uses that can be considered open space, and so we just wanted to hear from the group your thoughts on these areas. If anyone wants to start, Bennett?
I've got a question first. So on the next page in the packet, item 1, Conservation Commission principles. Protect large, contiguous, undisturbed natural areas wherever possible. Design developments to create open space linkages to adjacent to regional things. So the term is already in here, so that makes me kind of think, where else may the term open space be, whether it be in ordinances or whatnot? And so we may need to consider what may have been intended in ordinances and or other town documents prior to trying to, I don't want to like redefine a term that was meant to be something else. You know, that's maybe the worry, but the way I'm reading it here, I'm feeling like that really should mean undevelopable space. So my opinion,
Undevelopable or undeveloped?
both, but really undevelopable. So I would say conserved things. But I wouldn't count farmland because farmland's developed. I wouldn't count parks because parks are developed. I wouldn't count fields because they're, you know, irrigated naturally. The way I'm reading this personally is like trying to create. The way this is written, it looks like what I would say would be conserved land. That's the trick, but I don't know if others feel the same way, or if this term is thrown around more loosely than maybe it should have been. If we're trying to define it, that's why I'm a little hesitant.
And I think we're trying to define it in the context of our open space plan. So when we're talking about the plan that is in development, and we say open space or conserved open space, what does that mean? Because it does have a variety of meanings, and so I think that that's why we are trying to define it for the purposes of our plan, which will also relate to the town's 30 by 30 goal, and things like that.
And you bring up a good point, like this group, really, you probably are all gonna say it's conserved land, it's probably based on your principles. Other groups are gonna say everything's open space, and part is open space, right? So that's why we're shipping it out, and we have such a diverse steering committee.
I have a follow-up. To me, there's a difference between open space and conserved land. But that's my definition of it, and for 30 by 30, we're not talking about open space 30%, we're talking about conserving 30% of Scarborough by year points at least. So to me, that's two different things. I see it, to me, a lot of the things on this list are open space. I consider them to be open space. The one I severely question, state or federally owned properties. I think that needs to be much more drilled down as to what that means. Is a DOT maintenance lot, is Scarborough considered open space? I don't think so.
No.
So I think we need to be a lot more specific in there in terms of that. But to me, a lot of the other things listed should count as open space. Conserved land, no, but open space, yes.
I think Pete, to follow on, same with town-owned properties, there are a host of different types of town-owned properties, some of which could be considered open space and
Municipal complex,
yes.
not open space. Public safety building, no.
But would you consider Memorial Park open space?
So, in terms of drilling down what those are, it would be, state, federally, town-owned, conserved land and parks? Or parks? How would you drill that down in terms of the difference between open space and? Like, what are you thinking about in
I
terms of?
think we
what
could
you call it?
probably. Like. This town-owned properties is a big long list, and we have some of those there, passive parks and active parks, to me, are open space, that could be town-owned. There could also be conserved lands that are town-owned that fall into that, so. I don't know about. I think this could be grouped,
Okay,
kind of like what you said, but. It's not just the town and state federally owned properties. It's not just the conserved areas.
What do you think should be counted towards the 30 by 30 goal on this list? Think about it, maybe.
30 by 30,
Mhm.
State and town conserved areas, state, federally, or town conserved areas. That also would get at Scarborough Land Trust properties. I agree on the HOA parks and natural areas. Conserved farmland, yes, not other farmland. I don't think that should be. I don't think active parks would be anything associated with conserved space. I question passive parks. No, I don't question passive parks. I think that would be good, but like a ball field, I do not consider. So playing field, no. Community gardens. No. Trails, yes, especially if they're public. If they're not public, no. I don't know what we mean by scenic areas.
Right.
That's too broad. Beaches, for sure, especially if they're publicly owned. If they're not, I don't know, they should count. So that gets a little bit confusing because in Maine, you own down a little timeline. Cemeteries, I do not think should be considered conserved areas. And I don't know about other, but that's my opinion.
Quick question, what do you consider, or what is the definition of conserved farmland versus other farmland? Can you not, like, what do you do with conserved farmland? You
You
can't
can
grow
still
crops?
farm it, like Broad Turn Farm is a conserved farm.
Yeah.
So it is a working farm, it will always be a working farm.
It's permanently
Whereas
protected.
other
It cannot
farmland
be
would be
developed in the
not.
future.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
So that to me is a big one, because
Yeah.
a lot of our farms are going to development, so.
How would you consider, so one of the yeses for 30 by 30 is passive parks, trails and green space, so. Let's say there's, so there's green space in, a community, like, I don't know. Pick Piper Shores, I don't know, so they've have a lot of land around them, and they have parkland in there. They also are adjacent to now trails, but I'm talking about on their property, I'm not picking them out, I'm just saying as an example. And they have a large area where there's not houses or apartments on it. But that's a park, would that count towards
As
30
long
by
as it's
30?
never developable, yes.
So it would need to be
I think,
claimed as.
to me, conserved lands means it is placed in conservation. For
Okay.
the purposes of keeping it open to public. Or conserved as natural space.
Okay, so
So
that's good, that's a great
HOA sort
definition.
of
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah, so that's why I think the HOA stuff falls into that category, as long as it has that language. in it.
Would
But
there
I
need
would
to be
almost
a,
defer to Andrew, because you guys have so much experience in terms of.
He was just raising his hand. I mean, you
Oh,
can't see
okay.
behind him.
well, would there, and I have a follow-up was, would there be, what do we think about as a minimum size of a space like that?
Half an acre.
Half an acre? Andrew? And then
Just a couple things for you guys to consider. One, I don't have it here tonight, but the state does actually have definitions
Great,
of all these things that we're kind of using in our meeting when we do this
okay,
very soon. Land trust, as kind of a baseline to kind of compare against. The other thing is if you go back to the root of 30 by 30 internationally, which is where it started, it was an attempt to preserve biodiversity in the world, both in lands and the oceans.
Hmm.
And it was an idea to really protect the majority of biodiversity on the planet. At a minimum, you needed to protect 30% of the land and 30% of the oceans. And they chose the year 2030. That is different than open space. I mean, that is a very targeted biodiversity goal. Now, I'm not quite sure what the resolution by council, the wording is, and how specific they get there. But I just wanted to point out that 3030 has that kind of background to it of what it's trying to achieve. And it's not an easy thing. We wrestle with this all the time about, how do we define something? But conserved typically means legally conserved. So if you have, for example, you have town properties now that are natural areas, but don't necessarily have any permanent conservation on them. And then you have other town properties that do have a layer of permanent conservation. And the question is what are you counting that could change over time? So if you have a town property that is natural area now, but the town decides, 5 years from now, they want to build a solar park there, is that open space and just the amount of open space changes over time? Or do you have a category that is conserved, that's permanently conserved going forward?
thanks. I wanna, Pete and Kathleen, but I found quickly here's one sentence or two sentences about what Maine says is open space. The parcel must be preserved or restricted in use to provide a public benefit. Benefits recognized include public recreation, scenic resources, game management, and wildlife habitat. So Pete and then Kathleen.
I was just wondering under other, whether or not it made any sense to include like regulatory buffer areas.
Say more.
So I mean, one of the things that we're talking about later are environmental standards. So, and in those environmental standards, we're establishing buffers where very, very limited or even no activities can occur depending on what it's adjacent to.
So regulatory protection.
Yes.
So rather than a legal deed restriction, a regulatory.
So I was, in my mind, if that is effective, it really puts something in perpetuity where that's a protected area. Because you can only do very, very limited activities in those. In some areas you can't do anything. So in my mind, that might, quotes, be something we would consider conserved lands. I don't know how others feel about that, but I mean, if we had like a 250-foot buffer automatically, or I'm just using that as an example, around Scarborough Marsh, and said, thou shalt not do anything with this 250-foot buffer. Does that need to have an easement then on it for us to consider it conserved land? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just bringing it up as an example. But
I think that will be part of the discussion, as part of the open space plan, because that is something that, the consultant brought up was considering zoning as part of, this process.
So that's what I want to bring up.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Just one quick thing about this list that sticks out to me is I don't see forested areas listed, and I feel like I mean, maybe that's implied in these other categories, but I feel like that is one of the biggest habitat losses that is just quickly going away with development is stands of contiguous trees.
Thank you.
I think of this in terms of categories. So there are some natural areas with permanent protection that are ecologically critical. And, you know, they're sort of the premium tier. And then there, you know, sort of open spaces overarching, and then within open space, there are categories. Because that's easier for me to wrap my mind around, and that rather than not necessarily eliminating or keeping these, but sort of binning them into those categories. And while they might all count as open space, we're not considering them equal in ecological value to the town. So there might be permanently protected, conserved natural areas, which is potentially the smallest category, but then which falls within open space. I don't know. That, I like to complicate your life.
Well, it's the argument that a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't necessarily a square.
Yeah.
So it's the conserved land is open space, but all open space.
It's not conserved land.
Yeah,
And in terms of the open space plan helping us prioritize,
Yeah.
then, you know, 1 acre is not 1 acre with 1 acre. It'll help us prioritize if we have these different categories, you know,
Yeah.
or it's sort of a weighted thing.
And there might be, I just think like a vernal pool, like there could be a vernal pool that we need to protect. And it's, you know, it might be small, but it's very, very important. So, you know, we wouldn't eliminate it based on size because
biodiversity.
biodiversity part,
Right, and then that gets to the potential right to revolve, or not
Right,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
with the regulatory protection. Yeah.
this would be according to what we came up with, a minimum 200 feet.
Yeah.
So. Then, does that mean it's protected and falls under that, or does it still need then have that 250 foot be placed into conservation for us to account?
Because, so I chicken out, I'm like, well, we could have regulatory, open space that is protected through regulation is its own category. So that it's on a map and it's highlighted. But then we can decide how it fits in meeting our goals and our prioritization. But still recognizing that level of, that layer of protection for those lands.
Is there any risk though if the regulation changes in the future?
Well, that's why it would be its own category and its own color, because there are levels of protection that, you know, are perpetual.
Yeah.
And there are those that could change with zoning.
You're adding colors to this now.
I am absolutely adding colors. There might be some hashes. Because a parcel can have multiple, like a single parcel could have a structure, which we're not considering open space, but we're not gonna throw out the whole parcel. It's just, we'll cut out the house and it could have regulatory protection, and it could have, you know, an easement on it, so conservation easements could have legal protection, all in the same property. Different colors, different hashes.
Another maybe dumb question. Maybe this is to be answered once we've defined open space, maybe not. But what exactly is the goal of the open space ad hoc? You know, committee. What are we trying to achieve by having this committee to define open space? You know, if the end goal is clearer, then maybe it will help us be clear as to how we want to properly define open space.
Well, the committee is essentially functioning as the steering committee for the development of the open space plan. And the open space plan was intended to help us achieve 30 by 30. So obviously within that, there's going to be layers, because as we've talked about tonight, 30 by 30 is really about conserved land. But having, you know, as Scarborough's population grows, having proportional open space is also important, whether that's, you know, active and passive parks.
We
And
do need parks, even if, you know, can't go wandering around on over habitat, but you need somewhere you can like walk your dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the end goal is really to have a map, if you will, of the town with high, low, and medium priorities of areas for conservation. And that we can, when we're having development conversations, we can have that, and then we know where they're connected. So when we get into transportation, there's opportunities for trails. You know, it's all these, just looking at the town in this holistic view. So that's why conserved land is really important, but also all the little things are important too, because it gets you to the conserved land points. And to your point, having different levels, I think is the way to, so you don't disregard everything.
Right,
You
right, it's
get-
like that,
You get some credit for all the things, but maybe not towards the 30 by 30. So that's what we're trying to get from all the different groups, is to really get the most important part.
and that connectivity is so important,
Mhm.
both for wildlife and for people. so.
Exactly.
I mean, to me, a low hanging fruit on this one is, well, this is getting off topic, but like the commission, I don't know, it's 8 years ago, whatever, we went and looked at like 8 town-owned properties. Walked them and said, that should be put in conservation. That should be put in conservation, do nothing. That should be put in conservation. So it's like, the town already owns it, it's just, they just have to sign up and easement on it. And it'll be easy, and they were pretty big parcels. I mean, we've talked about one of them, but it's, the Hampton Circle. But it needs that level of protection to be counted to 30 by 30. It's not enough for the town just to own it. And that's, it needs, so. Yeah.
And we'll talk about a little later too, that all conservation easements are concerned aren't the same.
Right.
What we're finding is when people throw out conservation easement, it is recorded conservation easement, but it allows for activity, like I know you were talking about like limited activity, but it also allows for, say, the development of that area. Which is what we're finding with certain conservation easements.
Yeah, to me, that wouldn't count.
But you wouldn't know that if they're coming to you and saying, well, I have a conservation easement, you would really have to drill in.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want this to become a
Yeah.
game GIS exercise where we're like, oh, we can get the 30 by 30 now
Right.
by counting
Yeah.
community gardens and playing fields.
Right.
Right.
So what? That's not doing anything.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
ecological benefit.
But I
So-
would like to identify, these are town-owned properties that meet our goals, so we could move them into
Yeah.
the higher protection category and get credit for them easily. I think
Agreed.
those are important
Yeah,
things to identify, and I guess I'm really stuck on this categorization.
Well, it's kind of prioritizing, that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're
I
talking
mean, I
about.
think your open space list is pretty good. For open space. The concerned land list would exclude lots.
Yep.
Yep.
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah. Maggie, how's that? Thumbs up.
It sounds good. I'm. Yeah, so this is, and I'm sure that all of this, the comments will be in the minutes,
Yes.
as well. So in case I missed anything.
Yeah, we'll
Thank
make
you all.
we'll make sure that the notes are pulled together before the May 7th meeting so that you'll have them for reference.
Okay. Great.
Do you anticipate that
Thank you all.
in that meeting, it will be defined?
Thank you, Maggie.
No, wait over there.
Yes.
So there'll be a report out at our,
Yes, at the June, at our May meeting, there will be a report out.
at our May meeting.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think positive.
Yeah, the goal is for it to be defined, at that meeting. And it's, the consultant was like, we go through this with every open space planning process, like, because it is, everybody has their own opinion, so just making sure that everybody is on the same page. They're like, this is the start of every process, so it's nothing new, for them. So, and then I do want to just mention too, that, the first kind of public meeting, public forum to bring, people in to talk about, kind of what's important to them, what they want to see in the open space plan, where they think, the town priorities need to be, and helping define those priorities, will be hopefully sometime in July. That's the target date for that. More to come after the ad hoc committee starts meeting. But I think we'll have a date set. The goal is to have a date set at that May meeting also. So we can start doing outreach.
Thanks, everyone.
Exciting.
Yes. Let's move on to environmental standards, where we are in this process.
So do you want to take that one?
Oh, it's just an update. We presented to ordinance committee and he is invited to every ordinance.
Congratulations,
He is
Rob.
the leading presenter of scientific information, so it went really well. We have, I'm going to be presenting it to long range planning committee in May. We canceled our April meeting because I had several people out of town. And we also have a developer forum to be determined date in May to present, and just get some more feedback. And then we'll go back to ordinance committee before moving on to council, so.
I have a suggestion or comment that I think would help us in this effort. For each of the environmental standards that we've established, I think it would make sense to have a couple of references that we can provide to long-range planning to the developers as to, we didn't just pull these numbers out of the air. So I don't know how or who or how we do that, but
I'm hearing you volunteering, Pete.
I'm volunteering to participate and help.
References like, these
Like
towns.
this other
use
town,
Okay.
reference to this
Yeah.
ordinance.
This is
the other
best
town,
practice, yeah,
Reference to state, main natural areas program recommending 250 feet being the minimum thing for vernal pools.
right.
They say up to 750, but vernal pools, minimum 200.
Even references of, this is how developers have continued to be able to build even within environmental standards such as this.
Yeah,
Because
if-
they
if there's
exist all
references
across the
like that.
country.
So I think that'd be very helpful for us to compile for each of our setbacks. Just to have just some of that additional. Because they might be like, well, where'd you get that number from? And we don't forget without researching a little bit more, going back and looking at some of the stuff we've done. I don't remember.
I think you provided some references. in some
Originally
of
we
the stuff
did,
that
but
you
I
put
think we should
together.
compile them and have them
Yeah.
as, I don't know if they're footnotes or if they're actual, just stuff that we have. That we can provide, but I think we keep still, especially when we get to development.
And I think the land trust provided some on the ecological side. Because there's the other towns who've done this and this is what those look like, but then, because they're based on science.
Right.
Right. We also have to stress in our standards that we are unique from other communities. In fact, that we have Scarborough Marsh. We have tributaries that feed into Scarborough Marsh and all of the health of those systems are intertwined. So we have to be a little bit different. Can't just go with the flow. We have to be a little bit more strict. Because of that. Whether or not that'll fly, I don't know, but we have to try.
What's the next, remind me the next dates?
Long range planning committee is May 10th.
Couple weeks.
Yes, it's the
Second Friday.
May 10th.
And they've seen this all along, just not the
They've seen
number.
the format, but not the number yet, but it's been quite some time.
And they indicated that having the scientific backing, that they would appreciate having that as part of it.
I feel like I remember comments from Long Range Planning Committee referencing the Chesapeake Bay. And that is an excellent reference of what happens when these standards don't exist to natural resources and how much effort, money you have to put into cleaning up the resources and undoing poor practices.
Yeah.
And then getting a whole community, including developers together or all kinds of stakeholders together to reverse and, essentially win prizes for how the good work they did to correct what previous generations have put in place. So I don't know, that might be. I feel like I remember somebody saying we should look at what they did there.
I was gonna say it would probably be wrong.
Yes, because my, because I used to live in that area, and that's why I care so much about the marsh and what's happening here in Scarborough, because I see. It's like seeing what the Chesapeake Bay was before all of the 4 grades of the Chesapeake Bay quality was. We are at a moment in time where we can prevent that from happening with these standards. So rather than having to undo for practices, we're at the moment where we can stop that and work together to improve things. Okay, so now we're next into planning board submittals. And we talked about wanting to look at basically the picture of what we look at when we want to apply conservation principles for development. And these are the Conservation Commission's, these are not only the Conservation Commission's principles, but these principles exist in communities and standards elsewhere. So kind of like what Pete said earlier about that we didn't just pull this out of the air. These are practices, good practices from other places. So do we want to go through these in terms of how we are looking at planning projects?
Yeah, yep, we can. That would be fine. So I just kind of took them as summarized them
Nice.
on here. You have kind of the additional detail in your packet. But these are all things that I think we've been talking about in one way or another over the past, several months and years. And it's a lot of it is what the environmental standards are based on. So especially, creating the buffers between development and natural areas and locating development in ways that protect natural areas. A lot of times by the time plans come before planning board, that's too late. And so I know Autumn and Eric will have, and Angela will have kind of pre-application meetings to talk with developers about kind of their site layout and things like that, and whether they hear what's being said and implement it, or just kind of continue on. It depends on the situation. Yeah, Jessica.
Would something like minimize impervious surface fall within minimized disruption to storage and movement of water? Or should we be a little more blunt? Because we were
more fun.
we were looking at that site plan in February, and it was pavement everywhere, and we spawned that discussion. So I'm like, well, maybe we just need to be very straightforward and have minimize impervious. Well, I don't know if impervious surfaces is the word we use. That's a little.
We do, I mean, it's good to call it out because it's kind of like a middle sentence. It's implied in all of them, but
Yeah.
it's a middle sentence under the second part. And it says impervious areas should be minimized wherever feasible. So we could, really call that out and go stronger. Correctly.
Well, and I think that this is also kind of a next step, like we discussed in February, is looking at the ordinance and scaling down those numbers.
But we're sort of giving them the signal that this is where we're headed.
Right.
Bennett?
We discussed this at the planning board meeting on Monday, actually, the one she's mentioning. And they had tried to put in the minimum parking spaces that by the parking. So I'm just throwing out, if we want to minimize the impervious areas, I'm all for that. But we also have to make sure that developers are aware that maybe they need to ask for a waiver on the parking ordinance, or we need to develop that as well to be in, in concert with the standards, so that they're not competing, like you need this many parking spaces, but you need to minimize the impervious area. Because they don't need that much parking spaces. We asked them what they need, like, well, we're required to have, I forget if it was 38, but we can get by with 30. So they could reduce it, but they didn't do that because the parking standards told them they have to have 38.
Or they could reduce the
Or
size of
whatever
the
number it
building.
was. Well, that too.
It goes
That
back.
too.
we are.
But I'm just, the whole point is that there are
We are
different
looking
competing
at
standards that we
Added
place.
parking standards
Match
and
up.
long range planning committee, it's our
Okay.
next project, because that, we need more parking for restaurants and we need less parking for everything else.
Right, so there's a balance, that's.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
number, but also what about sizing, the size of the parking spaces?
Yes,
And the movement around the parking space.
so there's more pieces to it than that one.
Oh, well, and then also the, as we talked about, it's the buffers to the wetlands surrounding that. If some of those were in place, their development would not fit on that parcel, like.
Mhm.
It doesn't really fit now, but they're squeezing it in somehow, and that, to your point, it just looks like the whole thing is pavement to pavement line. With some buffers, that's maybe not your site, maybe there's a better site that's more suited to a building of that size or the parking lot of that size, yeah.
I like that idea of calling it out, really,
Yeah.
because that would be a nice comment for conservation committee, just kind of a standard comment, like, this is 85% impervious, we recommend you reduce this to at least 75%.
Well, and it's
And I
pretty,
could start
it's
to
pretty
do that.
common for applicants and developers and their design engineers to hear. What was the alternative analysis to that, right? To not just say, reduce your impervious area because we like having less pavement, which we do. They're gonna just say, we did. But, and here's our need, and this is what we're providing. It's more about, well, what alternatives did you look at? And they can actually supply alternative layouts and options and say, here's why we didn't go with this, that, or the other thing. I mean, that's a very doable thing, that it's something that's actionable, that's easier for an applicant to actually take the comment and actually do something with that. And maybe they can tweak it a little bit here and there. It's more, I don't know, something you can kind of hang on to rather than just kind of this overarching concept of reducing.
That's great.
Good with that.
Yeah, how do we capture that?
How do we capture that? Yeah. I mean, I guess-
I think it is just kind of what Angela said was, what other alternatives did you look at? Can you reduce parking like if, for example, or?
Based on your needs, if there's any waivers, those type of things for parking stalls, aisles.
We just don't allow people to do waivers for parking, to Bennett's point, unless you
Yeah.
go to ZBA, or you can show
Yeah.
it in a future landscaped area, which is silly. because they're-
Yeah.
They're,
We need to make that easier.
so that's one thing.
We're bound by what the ordinances give us authority to do.
I think
But we
the
can fix
problem is, I think we've been burned in certain instances that are probably pretty visible to the public where there's limited parking and then. When you have parking on the street that you shouldn't be parking on the street, it's right in your face, and so everyone's like, why are you reducing the parking counts?
So,
So
and I think,
with a new use, you know what I mean, if someone has a site plan, they come in or something, well, I guess they would have to go through it for a new use, but. It's, even though it might be limited, there's just a handful of them in town that might have had issues. That's what everyone remembers, that's what everyone points to, right, so.
well, and they're usually restaurants, right? So you said more parking for restaurants, but.
Or
less
gyms.
Yeah.
Oh, and gyms, yeah, I forgot about the
You know
gyms.
what I'm talking.
Yes.
Oh, and we all can think of a few,
Yeah,
like,
that's what I
off-
mean, that's what you gravitate, you remember those, right, even though they're probably, they're not the majority.
They're not gonna be one.
The majority, right, it's
Okay.
not, yeah, it's gonna be the one-offs, but that kind of is what everyone sticks.
whereas the big parking lots that are empty.
Right.
Right, like there are plenty of those as well.
Yeah.
Especially as the way people do business changes. Very few people go shopping anymore.
And what is considered for parking lots does not connect to the size of the building or the use of the building, the occupancy of the building. Is that correct?
No, it
No,
doesn't.
Oh, okay, sorry. I
Like
misheard.
retail is 4,000 square.
Okay,
feet.
okay.
But restaurants really interesting, it's based, you get one space for 4 seats, one space for 2 bars,
Okay.
one space for 60 square feet of standing space, it's so random and wrong.
Okay.
So, yes.
So that has to be looked at anew, but we don't currently say this, like you're saying. this plan that you have just can't exist because there's not gonna be enough parking spaces, given the amount of land that you have and the building size you're planning. You have too few spaces for this size building and use. Is that correct? That's sort of the dilemma that we have in town.
When you said you can't get a waiver to reduce parking.
Right, you can't, yeah, so if you have a retail establishment and you need 20 spaces per the ordinance, but you really only want 15, we don't have a mechanism to ask for that.
If you need 20 spaces for your retail establishment, the land itself means you really can only fit 15 spaces, we still say, go ahead?
No,
Okay,
no, we don't have that.
okay,
You have to be able to park it.
okay. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so they would have to modify their design. They would have to scale down their building in order to meet their
Mhm.
parking.
okay. So, sounds like, help me summarize this, but it also sounds like we wanna give some limitation to impervious surface by a percentage or some quantity, so it's more than just say reduce, it's, here's what the standard we want you to meet.
Or it's, have you looked at X, Y, and Z to reduce your
Yeah,
impervious cover?
okay.
So giving specific recommendations.
Is there a standardized alternatives analysis that they have to go through? Now,
No, not necessarily. I think it's really, that's where it's whoever can really make the best case, I think kind of comes out on top on that one, but it at least. I think I found when we go through with pre-application meetings with applicants, I think if you just kind of plant some seeds in there too and saying. What if you rotate the building and you fit it differently and different, like just kind of, or just making them go through the exercise of. You gotta sit down and actually write something for us to show that you actually looked at alternatives, and it makes them think about it and like, oh, okay, well. We did the exercise and we actually found that we reduced it here or there, and it might be a little nibbling around, but they wouldn't have done that otherwise unless you asked them to actually take another look at it. And give us an analysis of what you what you looked at and why it didn't work, and a lot of times you'll find. Well, actually, this did work, or there's a little piece of it that worked, and so they can incorporate that.
and I guess the follow-up question is the alternative analyses that we've seen in the past have actually been real alternative analyses? As
Some.
opposed to, oh, I can't do this because the house is gonna fall into one, like, I'm just giving you an
Yeah,
example.
no, we see, yes, across the spectrum.
Okay, because that we see a lot in the state, give us an
Yeah.
alternatives analysis,
Well, we
And
have
it's
recent one
not
that
possible, one sentence.
was a hotel, yeah, and they were really close to the wetlands, and they had a long vertical, this horizontal thing. We're like, it's not gonna work, the planning board's not gonna approve this, you're gonna need to like do it as an L, bring it up to the street, redesign it. So we're basically, Angela's point, kind of helping them along, but they seem to take it to heart as they want to do.
At least having them
Having
actually
them
think
think
about
about
it, rather than, to your point, like by the time they come to the planning board, no, we already have our plan, this is our plan. And then to your point, my analysis is, how do I get to that plan? Is trying to get that earlier.
Inquiring in the pre-app has been really helpful, I think, for that, because they have to get in front of us before they even submit, so. they're
Yeah.
kind of-
But if they
They've
already
got-
heard from Anna and I to continue to look at it, and then Conservation Commission comes in and says, okay, show us what you did, and so you kind of give it the straight face test, like, did you actually listen to staff? And kind of look at alternatives and show us and write it out and show us what you did. And that only supports us as staff, who's been making the comments probably months before you guys see it.
So what I'm hearing is 3 tracks, a robust alternatives analysis process. A maximum impervious surface on the lot. And making the process easier to reduce parking for those. Uses that don't need that much parking.
Yeah, and so 2 of those will be ordinance changes, so well, I mean. We can recommend impervious cover reductions and ask if, and give examples for things that they might consider. But it would help if it's already in the ordinance that, as Autumn mentioned at our last meetings. Various zones, various land uses have set maximum impervious cover percentages. And then, as you said, the parking standards are going to be revised in long range planning, so that will hopefully help with the parking.
But even if the standards are dialed down, a easier waiver
Process.
process to,
exactly.
would,
Every site's unique and you can't just write a rule that applies to every possible site that fits that description. You don't know what they're gonna.
And parking's a weird one too, I struggle with. Our parking is so kind of different for each use, that if you have a building that gets built today and they park it for X. And then in 5 years, they get a new tenant, which is totally allowed, but it doesn't have enough parking or, yeah. It's kind of weird, so I'm having those discussions with long range planning committee too, so see if we can sort of standardize for a lot of our parking. And maybe put into place some other standards like shared parking and connections between sites.
Oh, gosh.
yeah.
So, okay, cool, this shop's not open on Saturday, but there's 20 spaces that this place could use if there was just a way to get over there, you know, so just that kind of thinking. So I think it's gonna take some time to get through it with long range, but nationally, there's big movements to do away with parking standards and reduce those things.
Yeah.
But you have to have the layout of your community to make it work. And so
We don't.
we don't yet. So it'll be interesting. The impervious, like that's an ordinance change too, but I feel like if we can dial it up for a few months where you got to see it, it helped get the ordinance.
Do we have recommendations for like porous pavements like pavers or just small amounts of aggregates? Do we get into that or is it just like a?
Yeah, Angela, like
Like to specify for them?
If someone says, oh, I'll
Yeah.
do more of a porous, like, do we
Yeah.
give guidance on what's a good?
Well, we encourage those type of things right now, and we're looking at, we'll have to have a low impact development ordinance in place, and so when we do talk about those kind of things too at the pre-app meetings with seeing how are they thinking for stormwater management? But we don't really kind of specify how to get there.
but it does kind of sometimes present a problem with salt and the way.
Right, and different sites are different watersheds.
Yeah.
So we do have those conversations around, yeah, and a lot of times it might be where it's located. Whether you're near the marsh or whether you're in an urban informed stream or all any of those kind of things. You can look at different. So we have those conversations, but don't really necessarily direct them. I guess I would say.
Anything else out of that? Shall we move on to our sample site?
Yes.
All right, let me get it pulled up here again. Bear with me as I move through. Oh, you guys are still seeing that. Why are you still seeing that?
I
Like,
think you have to stop sharing first.
I did stop. So I don't know what's happening. Hold on a minute. Let me close out of this. All right, there we go. So what was in your packet was, Scarborough Downs Road. So this is a, amendment to a subdivision plan. And really to look at developing a parcel that's located in this area, but we're going to focus on the road this evening. And where's the memo? So there was a memo in your packet, and then I also, last night sent around a memo that was provided from the Downs Development Team, kind of in response to, what was laid out in the memo that was provided to you. I think it'd be helpful if we do a little bit of orientation first. Let me get us. So, Angela, I don't know if you want to do this or I can start and you can jump in and correct me.
Does everyone know where we are on the?
No.
So
Yeah, so
if you zoom out, I think one of the other ones where you can see like Payne
Costco is like plan list.
go on there.
And then there's. the
Yeah, like
roundabout.
So,
So Costco's on the far left. You can see that's the intersection with Innovation District, the Innovation Way and Payne Road. And if you go off the page, is Payne Road. You can see at the very bottom corner. And then along the bottom is Higas Parkway, and they have a new road coming in to Downs Road, which is Market Street.
That's the new road.
That's that one, yep. And then off the page, obviously, to the right then is Route 1. And so if you came in from the Route 1 entrance, you can go all the way through. And you end up like going through the residential section off Route 1. You would end up on this mid-page, going out midway, page right.
So like, right,
For this,
Stage, right, yeah. And so everything will be kind of connecting into this T intersection underneath the yellow box. Which you'll be able to then continue through, which you would, I think, it's always been that this private driveway that is also a cut through. We're finding, right? People tend to cut through the Downs, even though it's not a public street, for decades. And I think even the school buses and stuff use that as kind of this direct and emergency vehicles, and they've allowed it. And so then it gets you back over to where there's a new roundabout constructed here at Costco. And then out.
so it's over, the roundabout's like right over. in here,
Yeah.
right?
So, the center of the project, they are calling Town Center. And that is this blue dash line around the outside. Interesting enough, though, so is that's the subdivision?
the red?
No, the blue.
The blue is,
Oh, no, it's not the whole stuff.
That's Town Center though.
But it's, yeah, the master planner.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the blue is Town Center though. So we are talking about everything in the blue. Yeah,
What's
But
that?
the subdivision amendment is just for that.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess thinking of Sam's comments. Anyway, so
Thinking out
now
loud.
I think you can like probably zoom in now.
Meaning that what is outlined in the blue is potentially
It's
future
part of their
plan for,
master plan.
yeah,
Yeah.
plan
for
for
Town
development.
And what is that hatch? Color?
The hatch.
Well, it keeps saying the conservation easement. What's the conservation easement?
so
It's different color, what do you wanna call that?
this,
That's
the
wet.
gray, that's wetland.
Mhm.
The white is upland, the gray is. Let me go
So
back.
that,
So
Okay.
this is a vernal pool.
the whole thing is wetland in the town center of the planning.
Yeah.
So what's outlined in red is a vernal pool. A very large vernal pool. And then this dotted line around it is a conservation easement.
Oh, that's the easement, okay. And then that's, the rest of it's wetland.
The red line is a vernal.
Why is the line so small on the south side?
Road's already there.
Yeah, so Downs Road is an existing, right now it's a private right of
Okay,
way.
gotcha.
And so this proposal is to bring the road up to town standard. And create a public way into, essentially the town center, and the parcel that's being proposed for there.
So what is town standard? Is it one lane each way? Like, what will it look like?
Yeah, so it'll be two-way traffic. It will also have a multi-use path. I think they're proposing a 10-foot wide.
On one
bike,
side or both sides?
one
One
side,
side.
on the
On the
Plan
side.
North side.
So north is the vernal pool side?
Well, that's why I'm playing Plan North. I don't know if you have an arrow.
Yeah.
But yes,
So the
On
vern-
that side of the road.
yeah.
On the vernal pool side of the road?
Yes.
Okay,
What they said though,
But with-
is they don't want to increase the impervious, they don't want to increase the disturbed area.
okay.
Trying to keep what they've already disturbed for the road the same. Not encroaching further onto the road,
Okay.
supposedly.
Right, so, so in what Jamie had provided as a memo, kind of walks through a couple of key points that would be extremely helpful to have Conservation Commission at least discuss or provide guidance for comments back to the planning board.
I'm so sorry. Where's the vernal pool on this?
It's up in this area.
Thank you.
And the first bullet is about what we're calling the critter crossings. So those are the red lines you see on those plans. That's what the Downs Development Team is proposing.
And to clarify, these two would be like open bottom critter crossings. This one would be a stormwater conveyance culvert that they're saying is a third way that amphibians could get from one side of the road to the other.
And flat bottom.
No, not
Yes.
that one.
Just
No,
those-
no,
that'd
it's those two down there, yes, flat
Would
bottom.
be open bottom,
Yeah.
natural substrate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this one would be a standard culvert.
So it's a little deceiving, the red lines on here, just because they're actually not connecting, say, from wetland to wetland. They're trying to stay in the upland areas, so it actually, their goal is to not impact the wetland areas on either side, as Bennett mentioned. And so they're really trying to keep it close in. The questions that we had were really around, where is the most optimal location?
Right, it's
for
like, what
these
critters
type of
are
things?
we talking?
Right, well, if you have a vernal pool of that size, I mean.
It's
I
gotta
think
be
you guys can speak to it
salamanders.
Better.
Salamanders
than I
and
can.
frogs.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so it's a little deceiving, the red lines, because they don't actually go as extended as this plan shows. It would be definitely within the road kind of footprint, so it would be connecting kind of what they're mentioning as upland to upland, which is really just a fine strip, say, along the edge of the road. And then it goes into these significant areas of wetland on either side.
Is there a cross section for the crossing?
So I've been requesting that. We have not seen that yet. I've asked for a few locations, at least at a minimum where they're showing them, but if we're looking at, you can see different fingers from the bottom that seem to make sense where, and then there's some areas that the wetland comes closer, that it just seemed like it would be maybe more opportunity for kind of that migration of that habitat back and forth. It's hard because we're not seeing all the information and where those elevations are, and to your point, how are you crossing from one wetland to the other? We did reach out to Army Corps. They mentioned, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read through, they do have an Army Corps permit for the entire site, which wasn't really specifically, this wasn't part of really the conversation and how you do these kind of crossings. So with a new crossing, so again, I'm not
For a new
saying
road.
this.
right. it's
This is an existing road, we should make that point, this is an existing impact. For a new road, we'd be looking at every 50 feet, having one of these crossings type of thing. So we have about, I think it's about 1,200 linear feet of roadway. And at this point, they have the two crossings. And I know one of which they're trying to get closer to the vernal pool, however, there seems like there could be some opportunity maybe to do at least a few more, like at least show us, again, we go back to these. I think it's helpful to give applicants more specific direction, not just say, we'd like to see more, but maybe talk about. Maybe we see every certain distance, we want to see a cross section, does it make sense here, does it make here? Like, give us a few options and then we can kind of look at it and say, okay, we agree, this one does not make sense. But maybe adding one or two, three here, these make sense, right?
Yeah.
But without all the information, and that's where we're at right now, is how do you move this project forward?
It's really hard to do without seeing any topography.
Right.
You would want these crossings to be at the lowest points in that topography.
Mhm.
So they may pick random spots that look good, connecting things that may not actually be good topography. I mean, to me,
They look a little even, just like at first glance, like.
yeah,
boop.
to me, like, you have a large expanse of wetlands on the north side and the
Yeah.
south side of, on the western end of this. So there should be more crossings there. There should be more crossings near the vernal pool habitat. To maintain that, but to me, one of the key parts is the topography. I mean, maybe there's an elevation, I'm not a vernal pool scientist, but maybe there's a key elevation that these critters need to move, and they're not gonna go up into the upland and over, maybe Andrew might in, but, to me, the topography is gonna be one of the key things that drives.
Okay, can I, Kathleen's gonna speak next, but I'd like to also add a question myself around, so below the road, this section of the road was, we're talking south now,
Like this area.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the plan is to develop that, because I'm looking at the different map with the blue line, and then there's a whole area here that is approved wetland impact. So my question is, the broader view of all this, we're looking at the vernal pool, the critter crossings into what? Which
Right.
looks to me like it's about to be fully developed, and then there's already wetlands that have approved impact.
I asked that question with them on Monday as
Okay.
well. I mean, of course, I was the representative. of One of the firms representing them, so people were moved, but he basically said they would have very limited opportunities to develop along the road in these parts between the town center and the admission district, which is because of all this wetland. Anything that they try to develop, they have to get through planning board, and if they're just trying to build a big parking lot without wetlands, it's never getting off through. So basically, they're trying to get the road done and a path along the road, so you can get from one side, which is the admission district, Costco area, to the down center through here, and they're not gonna do much on either side.
I think
They
that
try and
leads
stop.
to, I think that leads to another one of the bullets, which was asking about, to Bennett's point, you really can't do anything if you're looking at the massive amount of kind of wetlands and there's limited development opportunities. Then should we be asking for this to be in the a conserved land? And at this point, the point to the north of the roadway, as Jamie pointed out, is called a conservation easement. However, it does allow for their construction, which they mentioned in planning.
And
board,
they
for-
hold the easement
They
themselves.
hold the easement themselves, and they are allowed to put, their construction access is through the buffer for the vernal pool on the north side. And there's also reading.
I'm sorry, the construction access is through the vernal pool buffer? Okay.
Yeah, I can point that out also.
Mhm.
Sorry to keep scrolling back and forth.
It wasn't popular at planning board either.
But this would be their construction access right
It's
here.
the existing habit room, right? So.
It's another
Again,
existing
it's
road.
an
Right.
existing
Okay.
road.
It exists, but it's supposed to be destroyed eventually. or
Yeah.
Rehabilitated
Where I
eventually.
get back to,
No, this one you don't use, it's further back.
Okay.
Or you
But
should.
it goes back to every conservation easement is different language.
Yeah.
And when you say conserve land, because I have a conservation easement on it, it doesn't mean that it can't be developed. And so when you're talking about, well, should we be asking for, say that next section, which they're saying is not really developable of wetlands, should that be in conserved land? Should the south portion, which is obviously a massive area, which again, they're saying can't be developed. They didn't really answer, even with the response, the question of why wouldn't you give it to, say, the land trust
And I
or
specifically
the
asked,
town?
yeah, they didn't answer, but
And they continued even with their response letter to really answer that point. And I think what we're, yeah, so as you build around it, the wetland changes and progresses, and so opportunities that aren't there today may be there in the future for development unless it's considered.
Thank you. Kathleen?
I mean, I think I saw that comment in the planning board notes or somewhere in the notes about the parcel, and I feel like we should be pushing them to put it in, to not be them holding the conservation easement, that it should be, we should be pushing for them to put it toward our open space, our 30 by 30. And I'm just looking at Pete basically said this, but like, I think if we're looking at a significant vernal pool area, we need to have crossings that actually connect those habitats. That doesn't make any sense to have it be somewhere where, amphibians are gonna have to work really hard to get through.
Sorry, oh, Andrew, yes.
Can I just put a little kind of ecology on vernal pool species? Most vernal pool species, that are breeding in those vernal pools actually are terrestrial species. Tend to think of amphibians as aquatic and they're always in the water. But wood frogs, spotted salamanders, Jefferson salamanders, American toads are actually terrestrial forest species. That don't have to use wetlands to get from point A to point B. So typically when you see crossings under roads for them, they include what we would call drift fences that basically funnel the species to those crossings. Because the spotted salamander doesn't know there's a crossing 50 feet down there, they're gonna try to go as straight as they can, which means up and over the road. So typically you see design standards. And of course, those fences, which only have to be 6 inches or so high, have to be maintained. If they're not maintained, then, you know, over time they degrade and then, you know, the amphibians just go right through them. And
So Andrew is a good example of that on 295 north. Up near Brunswick, or just past Brunswick, on the right-hand side, there's that fence that keeps turtles from trying to cross 295, is that what you're talking about?
I actually have seen that. I can't remember if that's exactly where I've seen it,
It's on
but
that section south. of-
yeah, and they tend to be funnels, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of funneling critters to those crossing points that you want. Same thing is used for actually large vertebrates out west. They, whenever you have a underpass or overpass for elk or moose, they have to have fencing leading the animals to that. If you don't, they just cross the road where it's easiest. So that's one thing. You know, again, because many of these vernal pool species are terrestrial, you take away their terrestrial forest, you take away where they spend 11 point whatever, 11.2 months out of the year. And, you know, just protecting the vernal pool isn't necessarily protecting the species.
How big is that buffer around vernal pool?
Well, it is 250 feet except for here. And except for there because of the road going through it. I can go back to the,
I was just wondering.
Andrew, what are those fences made out of?
They can be made out of various materials. Seen burlap, which has to be replaced. I've seen them flashing. And I'm sure they've used other mesh materials like that.
How expensive is the maintenance? So is that something like annual and you have to maintain, or is that something that's more expensive?
Probably be checked.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
especially
one
big,
95 is made of metal, because I've actually stopped a holy snapping turtle that big, it's crossed 295.
Bless you.
It somehow got around, that fence. I don't know how it got around. It got around that fence. So they're not foolproof. But that was a metal fence, and it did not look like, I mean, it was still maintained, but I've never seen anybody from DOT there. Or from the, yeah, DOT looking at it, but it's in good shape. I don't know what metal they used, looked like aluminum. But
Thanks, Andrew.
that's,
Marla, do you have your hand up?
Yes, okay, so my question is, if these roads that they're using to, drive through Scarborough Downs, if those were not there, would they be allowed with our current ordinances? Would they be allowed at all through that area?
It would be, yeah, they would have to do permitting through Army Corps and DEP, so it'd be additional, because that would essentially be all wetland, right? So they would do wetland impacts, and then there would be a lot of crossing. So that's where we're going back to, if the road was not there.
And the other point to make too is that currently that road's a private road. It's not very heavily used. And they're predicting traffic volumes during peak times at 3,000 trips per hour. We'll be using that road. So it's going to be seeing a significant increase in traffic. Once it's upgraded and becomes a public road and one of the main kind of access points for the.
Which then has additional impacts to those adjacent wetlands because of oil dripping out of cars, brakes wearing down, tires wearing down, this, that, so.
Salts that they use in the winter time.
Salts, yeah, so
Litter.
yeah, litter.
Yeah, and so that was another one of the waivers the planning board is considering, is that this is also. Is flat, there is no slope to the road, so. To that point, salting of kind of areas. It's probably gonna be a factor as you kind of look through that, but, also kind of wanted this group. I know we talked about it as like crossings and kind of talking about frequency of crossings is something I'd like to get in this group, but then also making sure we're having the conversation with that of. With every kind of critter crossing, you're also then most likely impacting more wetland, right? And so you look at it as, you know, tens of, or 20, 30, 40 acres of contiguous wetland. And how is that balance for you guys as far as, say, crossings, as opposed to kind of the nibbling of away at, you know, the wetland impacts, increasing the wetland impacts, you know what I mean? And how would you balance that? Or do you guys have any thoughts on that?
But to me, adding those crossings, and to me, one of the key things with those crossings, and that's why I'm a little bit upset about them not extending them actually into the wetland, is if we could actually reestablish connections between these sides that have been disconnected for I don't know how long. I don't know when that road went in. So if it's done right, if they're doing connections that actually go down a little lower areas, I know it's not helping some of those uplands you'll see that you talked about, but maybe we can actually improve the wetland functions of these two systems that are connected by using these, I'll call them box culverts, I don't know what else to call them. Whether it's a box with flat bottom that allows things to crawl and move through and water to potentially flow through when there's high precipitation events. So to me, that would actually also increase the resilience of the road, because I mean, this isn't a high energy spot. It's pretty much static, but with more connections, you have more ability for water to flow between those two wetlands in high precipitation events, which would be a good thing. So I personally would think the wetland impact of making a good crossing is better than making a crappy crossing that doesn't work.
And then pair a good crossing with protected, permanently conserved wetland areas on
Yeah.
both sides of that road.
Yep. But you have to have more than one crossing. I think, like, I'm just looking at the one to the south, or
Yeah.
to the east.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, to the west.
Yeah.
This one,
If I go to all the directions, I'll get.
the one on the left.
I think to me, you need more crossings where it's gotta be one big one. You know, I don't know how wide these are, I don't know the dimensions of these.
I think, they were going with typical what Army Corps would require, which I think is a 36-inch culvert, and you carry the foot. So,
Oh, just be, it wouldn't be a box.
no,
Oh. Now, how
They're
did
not
they
open
talk
bottom?
about having it be flat on the bottom?
well, because you fill it, so to that point, it's the same elevation on both sides, but
Oh,
it becomes essentially an arch.
I think these should be boxes. That's the plan.
They were I will say, they were following the Army Corps, I would say, standard detail. I'll put that out there.
That's Good, and we're in Scarborough now.
And that's what I'm saying, you
Yeah,
can recommend
yeah.
anything you want, I just wanted to throw it out there that.
That's the core recommends, they don't recommend flat boxes.
No, but they also recommend a lot of them.
Yeah, they recommend
Oh, right,
every 50 feet.
right, yeah.
28.
So maybe a,
28.
so maybe something in the middle would
Right.
work there. But definitely
Or
more
with
than,
that-
definitely more than two. And I don't understand what that other one does.
Well, that one doesn't really count. That one they need anyway.
Yeah,
That's an ex.
that's stormwater
One thing.
conveyance.
Yeah, that's a,
That's.
And that does not meet the Army Corps standard, that is a conveyance type, so it will have, still see volume and velocity that will scour out whatever's in that.
So I guess at 28 is what they would need.
I think that's
Or-
what Jamie calculated.
Yeah, for- if it's for
a new road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was a new road, they would be required to do 28 hours.
So let's work with that. Because I think there's an opportunity to use this hydrologic connection to improve the two wetlands together, but
Hmm.
if they're gonna fill that entire wetland and developing it, then what's the point of doing any of this? So that's why these have to go in the conservation stronger than what they might.
I will say, I know we started, they started the development of the dams, the intention is not obviously to fill these wetlands, these large areas, because the original master plan actually showed this road being removed and connecting these wetland systems. I think as they progress through their project and are seeing that there is, a benefit to keeping that existing infrastructure in place and how they have, aligned their roadway network internally, so it has.
They want to get Costco to the town center, that's the main,
It's-
right? They want to get from the Costco to the town center, so you need that road. Well, that's their view,
Well, originally, yeah, it was going up around, like that's what the Paddock Road.
right?
That's this
Okay.
area. Yeah, that's the connection, but like you said, it might be a more direct connection.
So that would be it. So that they originally were getting rid of that.
They were.
Did they mention that in the email though? As a bullet, I thought for some reason they mentioned somewhere about the potential to remove it and revegetate it.
That's this little section of road right here.
Okay,
That's the
I was
one
gonna
that's
ask
in
which.
the buffer.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
they were saying, utilizing that during construction activity for this, and it sounds like even for the next subdivision above it and to the left, so there's multiple other subdivisions that they may want to keep that active for construction purposes.
To make that just a bike path. So you have the bike cost there.
So where do we, what do you need from us? Is this conversation good, or do you want to hear more definitive from us?
What do you think, Autumn?
I think you should make a recommendation for at least 3 additional crossings and show us the cross sections of them, so the staff and the developer can work to.
With
pick-
topography.
With topography to work to pick the right ones.
and then we'd also want to
And
see
put in
different
permanent
designs
conservation.
And
of the
sorry.
actual crossings, right? It's not just the number of crossings, but the design.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Potentially wildlife fences towards the
Yeah, that's
culverts.
a-
I think
yeah,
that's speaking
that-
about.
Yeah.
Look into the potential for that. Yes.
And the maintenance of that.
And do you want to do the recommendation for additional conservation in that area?
I think so.
Well, I think
that's
there's,
something-
to finish that point, also to restore the hydrological connection between. So not just critter crossings, but reestablishing the hydrologic connection between the two. And then permanent protection.
Of the wetland system?
Both, yeah, both.
Yeah, we don't want to just protect one and not the other. Otherwise,
And do we want to say anything about how, the expectation we have of how that's permanently protected? In that it would be
permanently conserved.
with a third party.
With a third
That's strong
party.
enough with a third party,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I guess I'm curious, as a third party, what?
Hello there.
That's been something you guys,
We take a easement on that,
where it's just, it's
I don't know,
not, it's
we would have to look at it.
preserving that habitat.
I will say. If you do a conservation easement, you are not supposed to be the owner and the holder. The whole purpose of a conservation
Right.
easement, that there is another party that enforces the terms of the easement. You can't enforce yourself.
It
Right.
does have in here, that it requires permission from DEP to do any additional essentially development. So they would have to go back and, so with, as you would with any site law permit, they would have to go back to DEP if they wanted to put, construct any of these wetlands and go back and with the permit process, but I don't see how DEP's regulations would necessarily prohibit development, because if they follow the rules for development.
And who's going back to DEP, like the conservation holder, who is the owner of the
Yeah.
property?
Yeah.
So I would go with, I would go with appropriate understood standards, of what a conservation is.
Typically, it's against the law to
Yeah.
be the owner and the holder of the easement. Now I'd have to check about the main statute, whether that calls that out. But I will tell you, it is against IRS standards for deductibility for conservation easement.
The fact that the planned town center district is on the edge of the wetlands. I mean, nothing's come before the plan board yet about plans there, but I'm just thinking about lighting,
They're gonna have internet right there.
noise.
Yeah, that,
Okay,
that's proposed to be intermittent.
so maybe we could also have thoughts about that as those pre-app come before planning staff.
So not just the wetland, but also a substantial buffer.
What's the impact of, a buffer, so what's the impact of light, noise, use, population, activity?
That's a big, those are two big areas.
Yeah,
How much the acreage on this? You have that on there?
What? The acreage,
This one, right?
I-
It's not easily.
I'm not positive. I think this is 19.
Okay.
So I think in this one is right around the same.
And that southern one's huge, so that would be a huge balance in my mind for high intensity development for the downs and that sort of, I really think it would be a win-win.
And when you talk about lighting, I guess what might impact this conversation, when we're talking about the roadway, is roadway lighting, so how,
wow.
do you guys have anything to weigh in? I
Well,
mean,
they have
it's
those
a
lights
multi-use
that-
path.
They have those lights that face down onto the road and don't just glare out into
All
everywhere.
right,
That would be-
road, they
to
all
me,
have
that
to be
would
pulled
require
up. Well, that's our,
Yeah, dark
ordinance.
skies.
We can't have any lighting near the critter crossings.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
was
I-
gonna be.
Okay,
Yeah.
Maybe include that and.
And the-
lighting
and
is
the-
placed.
And the funnel.
Put it across, all the way across and no lights.
And then no road.
Yeah, no
Right,
roads,
yeah.
no roads.
Well, and then I think,
That's an option,
well,
still, right?
when I first was looking at this, it was right around Big Night, which is the night in the spring when all the amphibians make their way to the vernal pools and everything, and I was like, we need a Big Night plan for this area, because
Yeah.
that's just gonna be,
Can there be closures written into this permit? I think we can live without the road
for a couple nights.
a
out of
couple
the-
nights.
I don't think that would be reasonable to ask.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
well, I guess it wouldn't matter to them, I would say, it's gonna be.
It's gonna be on
the
the town.
It would be a public, it would be public infrastructure, so eventually this would be a town road.
Yeah.
So it'd be really on public works, so I'm sure the developer would agree to anything, because it's not really their responsibility to.
It would be the
enforce
town
that.
that has to do that.
So, man, can I back up for a second? Maybe I'm gonna just stall, I know it's 7:40 already, but
Right.
I might wanna stall this conversation so much. Why can't? What's wrong with forcing them to use that northerly route and removing that road?
We're too far
What's
down
the
the
original
path.
plan?
It's just too far down the path. What's that?
You can change that easily?
Because they already got their
They
master
already have
plan.
master plan approval and they already have a subdivision. With this lot, they're adding a pump station subdivision. We made them add the street in, so they're too far down a path to do that.
Yeah, I think
I don't think
it
that
would have
would be
been part of the conversation when they modified their master plan, put this back in, that's when the conversation
Yeah.
could have happened, I think at this point, the planning board already approved this road going back in, so the road is.
Yeah, and
is
they
there.
built a really nice roundabout at the end of it.
Yes.
Have you all been to that? Yeah, so I mean, that's the.
Stays far.
Because that, again, that was part of their master plan for a roundabout to connect back to town center, so it was all part of the transportation network.
Okay.
Which was discussed and approved by planning board.
And how they make traffic work through the town center, which is really narrow and tight and dense, and funnels traffic out.
All right, just wondering.
Yeah.
So do you have enough from us for?
I would say the maximum number of crossings possible.
Right.
Don't limit it at a certain number. But we definitely want to see more than that,
Well, like I said, I think we can ask for,
because I don't,
quite a few cross sections, and you can see where some might just not, I can see where it won't make sense, right?
there are some areas. where
So
that makes sense.
some that may,
They say we chose those areas to try and not widen the road.
right, that was the whole, that's why I was asking you guys the question about what if your impact
What's the
wetlands
balance?
for crossing, because you're swapping one impact for another, right? So how does that balance?
I think it's worth it.
You have to have a small roadway, width increase to make the crossings better. I think that's worth it.
Both hydrologically and habitat, I think.
Right.
You might be impacting more wetland, but improving the overall health of the system.
They do have a 10-foot shared use path that Angela and I talked about, maybe even letting them reduce that down to save some space within that footprint too, if they needed it, maybe to make the connections.
Okay, thank you. We're into new business with the FEMA floodplain maps and we're over time, so let's have the conversation we need on this, but keep it moving.
Sure, Autumn can.
Sure. So the FEMA floodplain maps are, they came to us in December and told us basically that we have to adopt these new maps by June 20th this year, and then we have to adopt a new floodplain management ordinance. So we have been going through that process. We're going to first reading public hearing next month, Wednesday. We've had a public hearing at planning board while I was out last Monday. Town council's had the first reading, we've had a public meeting, we have a really extensive website with a lot of information on it, but the main thing is, but the ordinance is basically, we have to adopt it so that our property owners can keep their flood insurance through the program. But there is one opportunity to increase freeboard. And freeboard is the distance from the base flood elevation, that's this, and where you build to. And we right now have a foot. That's what is recommended and what we put into place. But at the council conversation, and even before that, when the state floodplain manager came, she offered that some communities have chosen to go above that, 2 feet, 3 feet. So council wanted planning board to weigh in on that. And my understanding is there was a good conversation. The zoning administrator presented some information and planning board ultimately decided that they thought 2 foot was a good idea to put forward. At the last council meeting, they wanted conservation commissions to weigh in on the overall ordinance, and if you all had any concerns, and I think freeboard is really the one that you could offer some opportunities to weigh in.
Janet?
I
And
would,
then Pete?
I would just quickly add that they also, at that planning board meeting, they showed that Saco, Cape Elizabeth and Portland all have 2-foot freeboards as well.
Saco's 3.
3, excuse me, okay.
Mayor Scott, how do you say that?
Damascus.
Yes, 3 feet.
Basically, our neighbors generally on top of have 2-foot.
Damascus is only 3 for coastal areas.
Okay.
Right, yes, you're right.
My experience with this is now is the time to make the change. We tried this in 2012 and it did not work because there were the maps were preliminary. People didn't want to build anything to preliminary maps. So now is the time, especially after these storms, I would advocate 3 feet. Number one, there is a significant cost savings under your flood insurance. Well, if you go 1 foot, that's minimum state standards. 2 feet is, it's okay. 3 feet, you save up to 68% on your flood insurance, depending on what flood zone you're in. So, we had an insurance company calculate back in 2012, cost savings that you have on flood insurance for going 1, 2, and 3 feet above for a B zone and an A zone. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but they're different zones for the flood zones. A huge concern from the public, we had about 75 people at our meeting, we held this back in 2012, was, okay, great, I raised my house, but my road is gonna flood all the time. So the town needs to do stuff. Just throwing that out there. So my house will be high and dry, but I can't get there and I can't get out of it. I would advocate for 3 feet because there are several communities that have done so. We are in the middle of a high sea level scenario right now where sea levels are trending at least a foot above every predicted tide. We expect sea level to rise 1.5 feet by the year 2050. This is something we want to establish now and keep there. And then right now, all of our scenarios are pointing to 4 feet by 2100. So that being said, I would advocate for the highest number possible, 3 feet. And there are already model language to deal with setbacks and height restrictions that SACO has already dealt with. There are also some state standards in terms of some language that has been dealt with to help deal with piercing your shoreline zoning height restrictions. So there is model language to support whatever we decide, but I would advocate for 3 feet.
And again, this is something that the Conservation Commission has put forward since 2012. So
We were working with Jay Chase back in 2012 and had a long drawn out process of developing, number one, literature. I have tons of literature on this stuff. Presentations, we did a public hearing with presentations, and we even have schematics. Going back, and even back then we were pushing for 3 feet. So yeah, there's a history, but then it kind of died off because flood maps just sat in limbo for 12 years. Not in limbo, lots of challenges, but now that they're going to go effective, and just after these January storms, where we saw what the maps showed is what flooded, so it's the opportunity to do it. So I would advocate 3 as opposed to 2.
thoughts from folks, Bennett?
One concern that came up with planning board related to a higher free board, even though it didn't discourage any members from advocating for 2 feet, was that they applied to new construction, but it also applies to existing construction if you are doing any kind of building addition that changes your place by 50% or something.
Yep.
So it may be very difficult for people to do any kind of expansion if they have to raise their house by 3 feet.
Yeah.
Just saying. That was just a concern that was up
The
there.
cost is, if you're gonna have to raise it 2 feet anyway. So which one you have to do,
Yeah.
the cost is less than 1% to build an addition.
Okay.
So that really shouldn't be a driver, because the 50% clause would kick in with 2 feet.
Yeah.
So even if, so they'd have to raise it 2 feet, going up another foot is less than 1% construction cost. So, and that's a number that we also got from the construction community. So it was, I mean, that may have changed. But that back in
I thought
2012.
the 3 feet was more for the rivers, like I know Damascotta had it, they have a 3 feet by the river and then 2 by the shore. So I want to clarify, because when I look at Saco, I don't, is the 3 feet maybe more because of the river?
No.
Or are you saying that's just because of the
That's
coast?
right on the coast, yeah.
Okay.
I
And
think Brian
given,
might have mentioned about some of the inland
He did,
communities where
yes.
river flooding is concerned, and that's what they talked about. It seemed like there were a few that were even higher, and it was more to do with the rivers.
yeah, no, Saco's
Yeah.
3 feet, and it's their entire community. Damascotta does make a distinction, it's 3 feet in coastal areas, 2 feet everywhere else. And then there's another community that's 3 feet. I don't think it's Cape's 2 feet, Portland's 2 feet. But given the amount of damage we saw at Higgins Beach, for instance, how close we came at Pine Point. I think, and we have a lot of people contacting the state saying, hey, I want to go up and I want to go back on my lot voluntarily. they saw what the storms could do, so. I'm just gonna say that, I'm not gonna. Say anything else, but I think the opportunity to go 3 feet is there, and I don't think it's a wrong thing. We don't.
Autumn, go ahead.
Oh, I'd like you all to, I don't know if you want to vote on it or a consensus sort of agreement, you want 2 feet or 3 feet?
I'll make a motion for 3 feet, but I'm happy if people vote me down.
Is there a second?
I'd second the science.
Thank you. Well, any discussion on that?
What about discussing it? Like, I'm happy to,
Amend your.
I mean, I know Sue is here, but I'm happy to provide, or provide the presentation materials that we already have pulled together. Granted, it's from 2012. I'm sure I can find it for whoever needs it.
I was gonna ask if there was a memo from the group that might lay out
I
some
don't
of
think
the
that
argument.
got to that. Oh, we had never got to that stage. It was a preliminary presentation that Jay and I put together.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, to James' point, if you could even just give me a simple blurb I can include and, like the planning board recommendation is very simple, it's just a blurb, but a recommendation from the Conservation Commission, I would need it.
Probably not gonna happen.
Maybe
I can look.
you can look
I
and
can
see.
look. I can
But
look. In the
yeah,
morning, I
as
can
long
look.
as I can have a recommendation and then maybe by next Wednesday, I can get that.
Or if you can send us what you have and I can try to pull
Yeah.
something together based on the recording from this meeting and how the group decides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we invited Pete to another meeting. Then you can present.
But
He's invited to all the council meetings.
So this is on the agenda for next week, and I'm
Yeah.
actually not at the meeting next week,
Mm.
so I think the conversation was all around 2. I think you're gonna need a lot of support if you want 3. I think
this
you
is
would
the
need,
opportunity to do it.
I think there's gonna be, without me there really pushing for why we wanna do this. I mean, Autumn can do her part. I don't know if anyone wants to show up and speak to just that, or like she said, get something to really solidify the fact that this has been in consideration for the last 10+ years. This is really the only time to do it. 'Cause you have to do this ordinance and that's it. We don't wanna go back and touch it, because like we have to do it. So I think now is the time.
And sea level's not falling.
Right.
I'll tell you that.
So you want to take a vote? Thank you.
Yeah. Roll call, starting in person, Jess,
Yes.
Randy,
Abstain.
Abel.
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
online, Kathleen,
Yes.
Marla.
Yes.
So it is 5-1
Great job, everyone. Thank you.
or
Thank
5 to
Stay.
abstain.
Okay, thank you all. All right, so, Marla and Kathleen, you want to do a quick run of, the subcommittee report?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I am going to make this really quick. I know we've run over. But we continue to meet, Kathleen and myself and Rita Breton, and we're working on some presentations, including one with Professor Johnson from Bates College on blue carbon. And we're hoping to co-host an event with the Scarborough Land Trust on gardening. They actually contacted us and wanted to collaborate. And so we're going to hopefully collaborate on both of those events. They're not scheduled, so we will let folks know when they are. And we've been working on some articles. So Kathleen wrote a really great piece about native plants. And that should be published soon because there's information about the Scarborough Land Trust and their plant sale and some other plant sales, like Maine Audubon has one as well. And it was a great piece. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then Rita and I have worked on a couple pieces, including what is a conservation commission, to just let the public know what it's all about, what we're all about, what we're doing. And then we also wrote an article specifically about our goals and objectives. So that's basically what we're working on at the moment. Oh, and I will say this, I think I'm interested in writing an article about open space. So I'll be in touch with Maggie about that because I think there's an opportunity there to write something, and you know, as that process goes along. So, all right, thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Can I come into some real quick? I just wanted to let this group know, when you talked about native plants. I'm on a technical committee where we're looking at rewriting chapter 500 is the state stormwater regulations. And part of it we're talking about is use of native plants on sites at statewide. So it's kind of looking at what would be required from all projects that trigger their thresholds. And I shared with that group the town's draft ordinance language for our landscaping, and so the group is looking at it, the statewide group looking at Scarborough's draft language and how we could maybe incorporate that at state level.
Nice.
And that's going to ordinance committee in May?
No, that's going to town council
Yeah.
on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, with the ordinance committee in February, but the timing didn't work out on my vacation, so it would have been a really big gap between planning board and council, so. That's one next week.
Nice. Speaking of town council, Karen, do you have anything you'd like to?
Prepared to be.
First time another meeting.
I mean, I guess I just walked out of a budget session and I'm advocating to maybe increase staffs at some point to further Conservation Commission and our environmental goals as a town. It's been a tough budget year, but I think I'm really happy with the progress that this group has made, conservation and environment generally. But we've been pretty preoccupied with that, but we have the open space committee meeting next week.
2 weeks.
Yes. Yep, and then we also have the land bond acquisition reserve fund, which I thought you guys might be interested in because that's the funds that we use to buy land. The Scarborough Land Trust always does. And they are doing their survey, and then they're going to be coming to the finance committee in June to discuss the results, and then they're actually going to be doing a workshop in July with the town council. So it's just, you know, I think it's really great that this is the topic of conversation. It's going to continue the conversation. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Why don't we just?
Yeah, so I think in February, so we had requested technical assistance from the Trust for Public Land, and Scarborough was selected to receive an in-kind grant. And the Trust for Public Land and the Scarborough Land Trust are funding a survey to look at the amount and the purposes of the land bond. So that is, we expect CLB to vote on our recommendation in our May 9th meeting, then go to the finance committee in June, and then they do a town council workshop in July. So we are steadily moving forward and excited to help hopefully fund our 30 by 30 goal. And really that's the focus, is making sure we have the resources to act on our priorities. But for land conservation.
For land conservation.
For land
And
conservation.
protecting our natural resources. Yes, great, thank you. Sustainability.
I will happily skip the sustainability committee
okay.
because we did not meet this month,
Okay.
but in lieu, I'm going to just say that the town's promoting No Mow May again this year. So if anyone needs a sign, we have them, you can grab them. So for just a quick rundown, No Mow May is basically when you don't mow for the month of May and allow the flowers in your lawn to grow up for pollinators. It's a hard time for them as they're just emerging to find pollen and nectar that they need in order to survive. And so we're promoting No Mow May or Low Mow May. So if you're not really on board with not mowing for the entire month of May, if you could maybe mow just once or twice and just reduce the amount that you mow throughout the month, that also helps. So
Great.
signs, and there's information going out in the newsletter, on social media, all that good stuff.
Great, thanks. Anything else, folks? This has been a real hefty meeting. We've discussed a lot, and I think it's exciting to see what we're moving forward, appropriate for Earth Day week. Thanks for staying over time. And to Maggie for zooming in from Florida, where I think we all wish we were. But it's good to be in Scarborough too.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Sure, motion to adjourn, anyone?
Me.
Second,
Okay.
all in favor?